Welcome everyone to our hearing this afternoon for the House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. It's Friday, February 16th, 2024 at 2 p.m. here in conference room 325 at the beautiful state capitol. And we're also having this hearing by Zoom remotely. And so for those who are testifying today, I would request that you limit your testimony to 2 minutes. At that point, I'll ask you to summarize. If you're testifying via Zoom, please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. If you have technical issues, you can use the Zoom chat function to chat with the technical staff only. Don't send me any messages because I don't get them. If you're disconnected unexpectedly, don't panic. Just come back as soon as you can and I'll try to fit you in to provide your testimony after you return. If the power goes off in this building and we have a network failure here, we'll reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision-making and post appropriate notice for that. If you're testifying via Zoom, please do not use any trademarked or copyrighted images. That kicks us off of YouTube, which is a problem. And I ask everyone to please conduct yourself with aloha, no profanity or uncivil behavior. It's okay to disagree, but don't be disagreeable. And that's all I ask. We're in this together for the best purposes to help out the state of Hawaii. Okay, first up we have, I would like to request that we could slightly change the order of the hearings, slightly change the order of the bills that we're hearing in order to hear one of the bills at the top of the agenda, because there's a number of people on Zoom who won't want to stay for or won't be able to stay for the entire hearing. And so I want to move up House Bill 1899 relating to state snails to the top of the agenda. So if everyone would refer to your hearing notice, it's at the second to last item, HB 1899 relating to state snails. This measure designates certain snail species as official state snails. And so for this, I would like to first ask the Department of Land and Natural Resources to provide testimony if they're here or on Zoom. Robert Hoff? Nope. And next, Kaylee Lefebvre, planner for the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, members of the committee. My name is Kylie Lefebvre. You did a very good job pronouncing my name there. But the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species is in support of this bill. I had the opportunity the past few years to work with teachers and students from across the state in learning about how to advocate for themselves and for their native species in particular. And we've done this for a few years now successfully, and they keep coming back because these native species are so important to Hawaii, and they know that, and they're passionate about it. And I want to say a big mahalo for moving this House bill up on your agenda today, because we do have some students on the line that are ready to talk to you about why this is so important to them. And so mahalo for giving them the opportunity. We're growing our student advocates here in the state. They're young advocates that are going to be leaders of tomorrow. So I thank you very much for giving them the time to talk to you about the kahuli, our jewels of the forest, and just hope that you support this bill because our kahuli are so very important to the state of Hawaii. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Kaylee. Thank you for your work. Next, we have testimony from students at Manoa Elementary. Online, please proceed.
Go ahead. Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, and members of the committee. We are Manoa Elementary students, here to voice our support of HB 1899 to designate certain snail species as our official state snails. The kahuli have an important place in Native Hawaiian culture, our oli, mele, and mo'olelo.
They also play a vital role in the health of Hawaii's forests and watersheds, and they are an example of Hawaii's high level of biodiversity. However, did you know Hawaii is also known as the extinction capital of the world?
And the endangered kahuli just might be next. But by supporting House Bill 1899, we can allow future generations to learn about, see, and hopefully care for the kahuli too.
Let's not get discouraged, but rise up to the challenge and officially recognize our kahuli before they are gone from our forests forever. Mahalo for listening to us.
Mahalo nui loa. Big round of applause for the students of Manoa Elementary. Everybody here in the room was clapping for you, and we appreciate you taking the time to testify today. Very compelling testimony. Mahalo nui loa. Next up, we have a testimony from Sharon Van Dusen. Next, we have testimony from Mahana Gu in support, and Cole Ide in support. And finally, we have testimony from the second and third graders from Le Jardin Academy, Kahuli Hui. And I think we're going to do this by video.
And members of the committee. I am Mira Marsden, a third grader from Leisure Dan Academy. Please support the bill HB 1899 to designate certain kahuli for each island. I'm a member of our school as Kahuli Hui, and I think this is important because these rare and beautiful kahuli may go extinct forever, and it will cause a lot of negative environmental impact on these beautiful Hawaiian islands. Thank you for supporting this bill. I hope we can save these beautiful kahulis in time before they go extinct. Bye.
Aloha chairs, vice chairs, and members of the committee. My name is Joni, and a student at Leisure Dan Academy. I'm also a member of our school's Kahuli Hui. Please support Bill HB 1899 to designate official state kahuli. This is important because the kahuli are endangered and one of Hawaii's most special native species.
Thank you very much. This was recorded earlier, and grateful that we got to watch it now. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1899? Yes, please come on up and introduce yourself, and please proceed.
My name is Noreen Yeung, and I'm the Malacology curator from Bishop Museum. This is Jan Kealoha. She is our captive snail coordinator at Bishop Museum. So she brought some of the snails that are candidates state snail species. Just wanted to say that we are also in extreme support for this bill. And we were so happy that when we first introduced it a few years ago that it had support, but it came back as an amendment that you guys wanted a snail for each of the islands. And so we did our duty to do that, and we got a lot of community support, and we also created these voting ballots that we had throughout the year for students to be putting in their ballots to tell us why they want these as state snails and why it's important. And so we were able to put down the list to provide candidates for each of the different main Hawaiian islands. And so we were just very happy that we were able to showcase some of these snails. So we brought Lamanella venusta that has been picked for the island of Molokai. We have brought Ka'ala sabrutia to be the candidate for Oahu. And then we also have a couple of other snails from the other islands that we have recently rediscovered. So this is Auricula armata from Kohala. We've been searching for it for 15 years, and we have finally rediscovered it, as well as Cadenella explanata from Kauai. So we hope that with this recognition that we can continue our education of all of these really rare species of Hawaii, as well as hoping to keep them for the next following generations to come. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
And we'll be here afterwards, so if anybody wants to be seeing them, we'll be loving to share these beautiful rare species with you.
Thank you very much. That's very special. Kahuli are very beautiful. Many of them are very, very small, but very beautiful. Thank you very much. And anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? Oh, great. I'm glad you're here. We moved up to the top of the agenda.
Right, I apologize for being late.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate you being here. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Rob Hoff, Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife, and the department supports this measure and will stand by its testimony. I mean, I think that the work that the snail extinction prevention program's been doing is really inspiring. The fact that they're getting these animals back into the forest is really neat. So we think that this is a great way to just raise awareness about this conservation issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1899? If not, questions, members? I have a question. First up, our last testifiers, if I could have you come on up. I understand that there is a video produced. Could you briefly describe that and how people might be able to watch the video and what it's about?
Actually, we've been very lucky to have multiple videos, actually. So we were just on Empowered by KHON, talking about these snails, but broadly how these snails and all of these species affect our ecosystems, about our health and such. So it is also already online. We also, with DLNR as well as the other institutions, we created a video that's on PBS. That also shows, it's about a 23-minute video of the plight of these snails, what we can do about it, the importance of it, not just for the environment, but for culture. Because with every single extinction, it's not just a biological extinction, it's also a cultural extinction, where we no longer have that physical presence of these beautiful plants and animals for us to hear, smell, see. And so all of these are all publicly available. And we're creating guides and all of these things for the DOE to be using also.
So if the public wants to view some of these video resources, where would they go to find that?
Currently, they are on the DLNR website, okay. And also Bishop Museum is going to be creating also a landing page website with a lot of the Kahuli curricula, as well as links to any of the videos that we produce, as well as guides.
Great. Okay. Well, we all look forward to that special landing page to make it easy for people to find all of these resources, because these snails are hard to find in the wild, so we want to be able to see them on your videos so that we can all appreciate them.
We're also developing a snail exhibit at the Bishop Museum, and we are hoping to hook up cameras to our captive rearing program so people can hopefully see them live through webcam. And we're hoping to create a program to have a adopt a snail or adopt a box where they can see the different snails growing and seeing how they are faring in our captive rearing program. So we will definitely put it in a space where it's available for everybody.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Any other questions, members? I want to make a special thank you again to the Manoa Elementary students for testifying today. Very compelling testimony, and that's great that you were able to take the time to join us today. Appreciate that. And I want to also acknowledge our chair of the Water and Land Committee, who is on our committee, who's here, who also is a great appreciator of the Kahuli. And she's a hiker, so she knows about how difficult it is to find these things, because they're so tiny. Okay, I'm sorry. Any other questions, members? If not, thank you to all the testifiers. Thank you online and in person here. Thank you for being part of this. And we will now move on to our other hearing agenda. So if you need to go off and finish your after-school program, ahui ho. Okay, back up to the top of the agenda. House Bill 2148, HD1, relating to professional land surveyors. This measure establishes a 20-year statute of repose for land surveyors, after which time a complaint cannot be made. On this measure, first up, we have Meyer Cummins, President, Hawaii Land Surveyors Association. Please come on up. Floor is yours. Please
Thank you, Chair
proceed.
Tarnas. Just to clarify, I'm past president.
Past president.
Yeah, I am a current member of Hawaii Land Surveyors Association. Thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of HB 2148, House Draft 1. Again, my name is Meyer Cummins. I'm a land surveyor in the state of Hawaii. I'm writing in support of House Bill 2148 because as a statute of repose, it protects Hawaii's land surveyors from potentially unlimited liability for the completion of a survey. I stand on my written testimony that was previously submitted, but I wanted to emphasize two things today that I think that I did mention in my testimony. First, I want to recommend that HB 2148 be revised to exempt the sanctioning powers of the DCCA provided for under Chapter 436B from the ambit of the bill. DCCA protects the health, safety, and welfare of the public from unscrupulous surveyors and other bad actors, and this bill is not meant to stand in the way of that. I defer to the language preferred by the DCCA to accomplish this exemption, but I'm perfectly happy to provide input if asked, and in my written testimony, I did make a suggestion as to how to change that language. Second, I would like to ask that the statute of repose be amended from 20 to 10 years. I believe 10 years is long enough for a latent defect in a survey to become apparent, particularly because our work it often goes hand in hand with construction, development, or real property conveyances. And in my professional experience, problems arising from a deficient survey quickly makes themselves obvious, largely because other parties with financial interests in the survey, they're involved and they monitor the results of our work. Additionally, 19 other states have statutes of repose protecting surveyors and other design and construction professionals with a period of 10 years or shorter. Even HRS Section 657-8 establishes a 10-year statute of repose for actions for damages based on construction to improve real property. So there's already precedent in the current Hawaii statutes. Taken together, I believe these laws support the finding that a 10-year statute of repose for surveyors is reasonable. However, I trust the wisdom of this committee to determine what is reasonable with respect to balancing the interests of the public and the professional, and I defer to your good sense. So mahalo for giving me the opportunity to testify in support of this bill, and I will remain available for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Board of Professional Engineers, Architects, Surveyors, and Landscape Architects. Sheena Choi, Executive Director.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sheena Choi. I'm the Executive Officer of the Board of Professional Engineers, Architects, Surveyors, and Landscape Architects. The Board stands on its written testimony and would like to just respectfully suggest amended language. So to eliminate any confusion regarding the Board's ability to take action against licensees, we suggest changing the language on page 2, line 14, from no action to no civil action. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. So that language actually was not in your written testimony, but, okay. Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony from numerous individuals, Alika Garo, Crystal Yamasaki, Nicholas Yamasaki, Victor Rasgado, Clayton Kaneshiro, Christina Villa, Eric Kaneshiro, and then we have Joanne Williamson presenting testimony in support. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chairman Tarnas, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify. I am writing in strong support of House Bill 2148, Draft 1, because it protects Hawaii's land surveyors from unnecessary cost and worry through the years. Thank you very much. I stand by my written testimony.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in HB 2148 HD1? If not, questions, members? I have a question for Ms. Choi, Executive Officer of Board of Professional Engineers, Architects, Surveyors, and Landscape Architects. Could you just one more time for everyone, since it's not in writing, say again what your recommended amendment is.
Sure. So on page 2, line 14, to change the language from no action to no civil action, so adding the word civil.
Got it, okay.
I can also send that if you need it by email.
I think we have it. And then I wanted to follow up and ask whether or not you've seen the recommended changes by the Hawaii Land Surveyors Association and their members.
We have. So if you do take their amended language, then we would suggest actually exempting Chapter 464-10, which is the board's chapter. It's licensee suspension or revocation, fines, hearings. But we believe that our amended language would be the most clear.
Would there be any conflict if we took their amendments and your amendments?
I don't believe so, but I can check and get back to you.
Okay. And they're asking for changing it from 20-year to 10-year for a statute of repose.
The board doesn't have a comment on the period of time
Okay.
at this moment.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. And
Thank
then if
you.
I could ask Mr. Cummins to come up. You heard their recommendation for exempting 464-10. Do you have any objections to that?
We don't know. Yeah.
And then also the First Amendment recommendation of civil,
We agree with that as well,
we
yes.
also agree? Okay.
sir.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's so nice when people agree. Makes our job much easier. Thanks so much. Okay, no further questions, members? If not, we'll move on to the next measure. Thank you very much to the testifiers. Next up, House Bill 2400 HD1 relating to education. This measure requires that licensed teachers have their license revoked by the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board if the teacher resigned or retired during the pendency of any investigation into allegations of sexual assault, sexual harassment, or other physical abuse of a student. First up, we have testimony from the Department of Education. Welcome, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Sean Bacon, Assistant Superintendent for the Department of Education. We stand on our written testimony in support. I just wanted to mention one thing. Since that testimony was submitted, we did have additional discussions with the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board, and we're agreeable to the language that they have on their suggestions, talking about surrendering their license instead of the revocation. We feel that it serves basically the same purpose and would be open to those amendments if we need to. Be open to answer any questions if need be.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board.
All right.
Welcome, please proceed.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Felicia Villalobos, and I'm the Executive Director for the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. Testifying on behalf of the board, we submitted written testimony with comments for HB 240 HD1, and I would like to highlight that the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board supports protecting students by removing teachers from the classroom who are under investigation for any allegations due to educator misconduct. However, this bill is asking HTSB to revoke a license prematurely, and we would suggest that an individual surrender their license if they decided to resign or retire before an investigation is completed. Surrendering under this type of circumstance would allow the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board to enter their name into the NASDAQ clearinghouse. This would then be immediately reported to all 50 states and jurisdictions that participate in the NASDAQ clearinghouse database. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. And next, we have testimony and support from Rachel Untalan. Anyone else wishing to testify on HB 2400 HD1? If not, questions, members? One question for the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board, Ms. Villalobos.
Yes.
So your testimony didn't include specific amendments, but you basically, it sounds like what we need to do is modify the language so it refers to them surrendering a license rather than it being revoked.
Correct.
That's the core of your...
That's the core of it, yes, is the word of surrendering, and then we can put them into the NASDAQ clearinghouse if they do not complete the investigation.
But that doesn't need to be in the statute about you taking the next step. It's just that we need to make sure we change it from
Revocation or revoke, yes.
surrender rather than revocation.
Yes, correct.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll move on. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, next measure, House Bill 1767, House Draft 1, relating to school bus services. This measure authorizes the use of motor coaches, small buses, and vans for school bus services if certain conditions are met, and it also appropriates funds. First up, we have testimony from the Department of Transportation.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, members of the committee, Melissa Miranda Johnson for the Department of Transportation. We stand on our testimony. To summarize, we support HB 1767 HD1, which allows flexibility for schools to transport students by motor coaches, small buses, or vans, and will be available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from the Department of Education. Welcome. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Tanis, members of the committee. Kurt Otaguro, Deputy Superintendent, testifying on behalf of the Department of Education. We support the intent of this measure and offered comments, and happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Otaguro, if you could briefly summarize your testimony for those who didn't have a chance to read it.
Sure. As we all know, not just the state of Hawaii, but the entire nation has been suffering or experiencing driver shortage across the country, and drivers with the requirement for a CDL license, a commercial driver's license. And that's just in general. The additional requirement that is required when you drive a school bus are twofold. One is the drivers would need to also be certified for a passenger license, a P, so CDLP license. And then on top of that, for a school bus, a certified school bus, you'd have to go for your S designation. So there's several more requirements for certification that these drivers would have to do. Now, over the last 6 years, we've lost approximately half of the drivers across the states. Some counties have experienced more severe drops, especially in the rural areas with hard-to-fill positions. And so the notion that this bill is trying to cover, we really appreciate funding, of course, and the flexibility to allow different sizes of buses to transport children, our students. And that, because of the governor's emergency proclamation, Chair, this has actually worked on the island of Maui, specifically in Lahaina. And so we've been able to use tour bus companies, because of no tourists in the short term, to have them transport. And that was, so we were able to do it. So it does work. But the challenge that we see is that it's not just a vehicle change, because it's people. We need people to get licensed. We've tried different incentives. Some of that has worked, so we have seen a slight uptick in number of drivers coming back into the workforce in the state. We've also worked with the city and county to offer holo cards for subsidized for our students. About 16,000 of them do ride the bus here on Oahu, and that has helped fill in some routes. But it's not, everything will help. Nothing will not help, Chair, and so that was the meaning for our testimony.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. Next, we have testimony from the Hawaii State Teachers Association. Welcome. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Laverne Moore speaking on behalf of Osa Tui, President of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. We strongly support this measure. And we stand on our written testimony, and of personal interest at McKinley High School, of which I'm a special ed teacher there, 14 of our members in June got passenger bus certification for the small yellow school bus, which we own 2 of them, that was funded through the federal government. So that would really work for the rural schools, to have the staff members go and pick them up in the morning and return them in the afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Next, we have testimony and support from the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1767 HD1? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. I appreciate the efforts of everybody trying to address this issue because it's a critical issue that we face in my rural district. So thank you for that. Next up, we have House Bill 1812 relating to corrections. This measure restricts the use of solitary confinement in state-operated and state-contracted correctional facilities with certain specified exceptions. It prohibits the use of solitary confinement and requires the use of appropriate alternatives for committed persons who are members of a vulnerable population. It requires the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to develop written policies and procedures regarding solitary confinement by July 1st, 2025, and requires the department to develop policies and procedures to review committed persons placed in solitary confinement and develop a plan for committed persons currently in solitary confinement by April 1st, 2025. And finally, it requires a report to the legislature and Hawaii Correctional Systems Oversight Commission. First up, we have testimony from Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Director Johnson, welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Tommy Johnson, Director of DCR. I will summarize my testimony, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So we oppose this matter. This is a bill looking for a problem that does not exist. We provided a copy of our policy on administrative and disciplinary segregation, COR .11.01, to the committee earlier today. DCR notes that the term solitary confinement is no longer used. Instead, if you review our policy, you'll see that our policy tracks with the National Institute of Corrections and the American Correctional Association. If this matter were enacted, it would hinder our ability to immediately address inmate behavior. I'll give you some examples. Recently, there have been unprovoked attacks by inmates on correctional staff resulting in serious injuries. One officer suffered a serious facial structural injuries. Another was hospitalized from being pushed down a flight of stairs as he rushed to intervene from one inmate assaulting another. And yet another officer sustained a concussion. A nurse was attacked unprovoked when she was trying to provide medical services to an inmate who was being unruly. If enacted, this matter would hinder our ability, again, to immediately deal with inmates who pose a danger to themselves and others. Separating and monitoring offenders exhibiting inappropriate behaviors are necessary for the greater good of the protection of the offenders. In attempting to cover most of the scenarios, this measure requirements tend toward generalities which run counterproductive to national standards as outlined in our policy. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Director. Next up, we have testimony from the Office of the Public Defender.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Deputy Public Defender Taryn Tomasa. I'm the District Court Supervisor on Oahu, dealing mainly with the misdemeanor offenses. However, I did do a long rotation in the appellate division, so I do have some experience within the facilities. The Office of the Public Defender supports this bill. Although we oppose any form of solitary confinement, we feel that this bill represents the first step towards the goal of complete abolition of the use of solitary confinement within Hawaii's correctional facilities. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'll be available for questions.
Thank you very much. And reading your testimony, you have a number of specific amendments or areas that raise questions or concerns in the measure. Do you want to highlight any of those?
I'll just stand on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the Disability and Communication Access Board. And we have testimony and support from the Community Alliance on Prisons. Ms. Kat Brady. Welcome, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas and members of the committee. Kat Brady testifying on behalf of Community Alliance on Prisons. Thank you so much for hearing this bill and for posting the testimony. I had a chance to review some of it, so thank you so much for that. We need to understand that solitary is not called solitary anymore. There are many, many other euphemisms like medical segregation, disciplinary segregation, admin, special housing unit, the whole control unit, all sorts of euphemisms that get away from solitary, which is so inhumane. So even if there are two people in a cell and they're really denied human contact with other people other than their cellmate, this is a problem. Many people have been murdered in solitary because they put people in who are mentally ill, who just kind of lose it in there. And I think we need to really start realizing that every person who's incarcerated by the state is a human being, and humans need social interaction. There are many, many things that we could do. Increased visitation, phone calls, programs for people in prison. I've been talking, I get lots of letters and lots of phone calls from men and women in solitary, and they all say, we need books, we need programs, we need to keep our minds active. And that is the big concern that we have, because that is really dangerous for a person. And then to send that person back to general population when they're kind of freaking out is not such a safe thing to do. So there is a section of this bill that I really love, and it's about, it's on page 18, and it talks about somebody who's sent to one form of segregation, say disciplinary segregation. After 30 days are up, the person's ready to leave, and then the ACO says, oh no, now you're in admin segregation. And this has gone back and forth, and I know people who have been incarcerated for years on this, back and forth, 30 days here, 30 days there. And so we need to actually enforce, if there are good rules, and some of the rules are good, we need to have a mechanism to enforce them so that people are protected. This is a human rights bill, and we really ask for your support of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the ACLU of Hawaii. Mr. Rhoda, welcome. Please proceed.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair Committee members, Carrie Ann Shirota on behalf of the ACLU of Hawaii. We strongly support this measure. As has been articulated by a number of community advocates and public defenders, it's very clear. The United Nations has stated unequivocally that solitary confinement, anything more than 15 days, amounts to torture. We can call it administrative segregation, we can call it the whole. To the person that is confined, it is torture, and I think we cannot lose sight of that. There are best practices in this area. There are a number of states that have enacted statutes, other rules, best practices, and I just want to highlight that we should follow that. Colorado, after reviewing their admin segregation, they changed their practices, reduced its administrative segregation by 36%. In Maine, after they made changes to their rules, they decreased the number of people in special management population by over 50%. And Mississippi, no bastion for a number of civil rights for people incarcerated, they changed its use of solitary confinement and reduced their segregated population from one institution of 1,000 people to 150. We have a much smaller correctional population, and I think what's really important about this bill is that if we codify this, this will not only apply to Hawaii's jails and prisons, but it would also apply to CCA, Core Civic, or wherever we export our people to under private profit prisons. And it needs to be consistent, it needs to be humane. Please pass this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from Life of the Land.
We stand in support.
You got to come up to the podium so everyone on TV land can see you and hear you. Introduce yourself and please proceed.
Aloha, Henry Curtis, Executive Director of Life of the Land. We're in strong support of the bill. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, we have testimony in support from the Hawaii Disability Rights Center. Mr. Louis Erdicek, please proceed, sir.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Representative Tarnas and committee members. I'm Lou Werdashek, Director of the Disability Rights Center. I just wanted to add my voice to what Carrie Ann and Kat and some of the others are saying. I don't necessarily have any specific amendments to propose, but we have long felt that solitary confinement is a really bad idea, and it should either never be used or only in the rarest, most exigent kinds of circumstances, if at all. And I don't doubt the good faith of Commissioner Johnson. I mean, I think he seems sincere. I mean, to me, the issue is that I guess I like laws better than departmental guidelines. And for years, I've been hearing about all these policies and procedures that the department has in place, and yet it still goes on. It still has damaging effects, and in particular for our clients. I mean, we know that a huge chunk of the people in there are folks that have a mental illness. It's really bad for them when they're placed in solitary. They decompensate even more. There's tons of data on that I'm sure you're aware of, and so we just think that giving it the force and effect of law is going to be more effective than just leaving it to the department to say, hey, we got guidelines, so we're good. We don't need anything else. I think we need something stronger, and that's why I support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from Nikos Leverins, Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. Mr. Erdachek, could you turn off your video?
Sure.
And mute yourself. That'd be great. Thank you. Mr. Leverins? Okay, if he joins us before the end of testimony, I'll bring him back. He submitted testimony in support. We have written testimony in support from Tricia Chong of NAMI Hawaii, testimony in support from Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii, and we have testimony in support from Zoe Ryan. Please proceed, Zoe Ryan.
Let's see, can I start my video?
Yes, please.
Okay, how do I get it going? Let's see, start my video, there we go.
Thank you.
Hi.
Please proceed.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I am the wife of a Hawaii inmate. I support oversight and change in the direction of eliminating solitary confinement under every guise. We are supposed to be helping our loved ones learn how to manage their challenges, not abusing and torturing them further, thus inflicting so much mental damage that there is little chance of recovery. Outbursts that harm staff and each other are a direct result of literally driving these men mad by locking them in cages. Solitary is extreme in mental and physical torture, exacerbating and compounding existing struggles. Prison itself is already a lonely, volatile, wicked place. It's hard enough to get through a day, let alone get nitpicked for every trivial normal behavior. My husband was put in the hole for his first entire year at HCCC due to lack of housing. 85 days last year at Saguaro, 30 for wearing his friend's necklace. How could this possibly warrant solitary confinement? He was given 55 days of solitary confinement for asking to wait for an officer that promised to give an answer to a really important question. There's zero argument that can support positive results from the use of solitary confinement. Our family now lives with my husband's daily struggles from mental anguish that is a direct result of his solitary confinement. Hawaii must find alternatives. We need to build these guys up, not tear them down. We are an intelligent species, perfectly capable of finding a much healthier solution. As Kat stated, the situation would benefit greatly by giving them something productive to do instead of locking them in a cage and not allowing them to even read a book. Thank you for allowing me to make a statement.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you took the time to provide your testimony. Let's return now to Mr. Nikos Leverins, who's testifying on behalf of two organizations, Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center and Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii. Mr. Leverins, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Nikos Leverins with Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center and Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii. This measure is necessary to help ensure that the state's carceral facilities, whether they're here in Hawaii or on the continent, are administered in a fashion that is congruent with the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation's express mission to provide services with professionalism integrity, and fairness. Limitations on solitary confinement are necessary to protect those who are already struggling with mental health conditions and other behavioral health problems. The American Bar Association recommends that solitary confinement should only be used in exceptional cases as a measure of last resort, where less restrictive settings are insufficient, and for no longer than is necessary to address a specific reason for placement, typically not to exceed 15 consecutive days. As our prior speaker could attest to, this is not a hypothetical situation looking for a problem. I would also like to raise the cases of Joseph O'Malley and Diamond Simonea Agu, among others, where the department has been grossly deficient in the provision of adequate care services for those with persistent mental health challenges. Confining suicidal inmates to solitary without prior authorization by appropriate healthcare staff, daily evaluation to provide needed medical assistance and treatment, and ensuring that it takes place in a clinically designated and supervised area is cruel and inhumane. I recommend this bill wholeheartedly. Mahalo for the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Leverins. Next, we have testimony and support from Olivia Chang.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to ask one question, which is like, what does it say about all of us that we're still debating whether it's okay to essentially torture people? I would just hope that our minds are clear enough and our hearts are big enough that we can ask what would a world look like if we were actually going to care for each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from numerous individuals: Carolyn Eaton, Diana Bethel, Raylyn Reno Yeomans, Robert Merce, Thaddeus Pham, Aidan Lee Velasco, Michael Paul, Carter Y, and Maddie Zeeling Chang. We also have testimony with comments from Barbara Polk. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on HB 1812 HD1? First, Ms. Koko Iwamoto.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Kim Koko Iwamoto, testifying on behalf of the Chamber of Sustainable Commerce. I was very moved. I didn't study this bill, but as many businesses are going to be tasked with employing people as they leave incarceration, and personally, as one of my businesses is owning an apartment rental company, and so I house people when they come out of prison. Also, and I just think that if we are injuring individuals and then sending them back into our community and not healing them or giving them services to be better than they were when they went in, I think we're doing a disservice, and we're actually causing our whole society a much larger expense. And then the damage that happens when people are in solitary, and then the settlements we have to pay out with our taxpayer money, I think that's really problematic. So I ask that I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to submit written testimony, we'd be happy to receive it. Next, please come on up, introduce yourself, and please proceed.
Aloha, Angela Melody Young, testifying, wishing to comment. On behalf of CARES, so I agree, building more institutional jails and prison facilities is not a good idea. That if there are going to be jails, we cannot fight reality. And if you heard me talk about this in the Senate, this is going to be like a read broadcast. So if we're going to have jails, instead of solitary confinement, we should provide medical care, right? The root problem is behavior. When one has offended the correction system and the judiciary system, the root is not correctable with solitary confinement, a judicial and corrections practice. It is outside of the judicial and corrections system to solve this problem. It requires integration with the medical sector. The root is a mental health problem, behavior. Some say jails and solitary confinement exacerbates mental health conditions. What are common mental health conditions? It can be symptoms and diagnosed conditions. So symptoms of a sickness in mental health is perhaps they could be experiencing hallucinations and have slow intrusive thoughts creeping up in the back of their minds. They imagine people and things which do not exist, and they hear voices and experience episodes of manic activity, extreme mood, behavior, and energy level, schizophrenia. They're debilitated with a sickness of their mental health. Can you imagine if you give them more solitary confinement time? Then what happens, right? So while I do not support solitary confinement, I do support a substitute for that, like mental health resources, such as letting prisoners adopt pets for emotional support. Senate Bill 2094 lets prisoners adopt pets, which in a few jurisdictions is already effective. For example, a pilot program from the California City Correctional Facility has a program to adopt animals. And so let's find a balance to this, right? Those who torture children should go to jail, right? Those who torture special education kids should go to jail, right? We heard about the things that happened and transpired. So there should be a balance. Instead of solitary confinement, a substitute. Mental health resources to correct that behavior.
Anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1812, HD1? If not, questions, members. Representative Ganadin, please proceed.
To Director Tommy Johnson. Good afternoon, Director.
Good afternoon.
Since I've served in the legislature, I've had the opportunity to serve to visit several facilities with yourself, actually. So we took a group trip to Saguaro in Arizona. I've also had the opportunity to visit several sites with the Oversight Commission, and I guess almost every site, except for Kulani. Kulani wasn't open when I tried to visit. So I've seen many of these places, like you have. This bill asks for basic data collection, information about the use of solitary confinement statewide. Can you tell the committee about how often solitary confinement is used? I understand that's not the term that you use, but can you say, for example, tell us how many individuals are being held in cells alone or in similar circumstances now?
Okay, well, we have a few different categories. We have safety watch, suicide watch, administrative segregation, disciplinary segregation, protective custody. In all those cases, the inmates aren't necessarily by themselves except suicide watch and safety watch, but there's an ACO right outside the door. Less than 1 to 2% of the population on any given time may be in some type of segregated housing. That would be around 76 folks out of 3,600. So the percentage is not high, and it's not used as a first option, it's used as a last resort. I think if you read our policy I provided to you, and you visit the National Institute of Corrections website and the American Correctional Association website, you'll see that our policy and procedures track directly with national best practices. We require reports from the facility every week for everyone who's in any type of segregation, and then we get to review those reports and then override those folks if there's a problem with someone being in segregation more than a week at a time. Now, some people are in administrative segregation longer because they may be a witness to a crime and we're trying to protect them, and they may be in protective custody for some time. But all of those segregation type housing, they are still authorized visits, but there's no physical contact visits. They're still authorized telephone calls. They're still authorized legal calls. They can call the ombudsman's office. None of that is restricted. We do have a library cart where we take books around to those cells so they can pick books to read. We can't bring all the programs to them while they're in certain types of segregation, except protective custody and certain inmates in administrative segregation. But disciplinary segregation, we do not bring the programs to them.
Please proceed.
Hearing that, of course, there's national best practices, but this would go something above and beyond. It would set a new floor for the state of Hawaii. Would you say that's correct?
I think it would set a dangerous precedent because not one testifier besides myself have actually been a corrections officer and have worked in a correctional facility and have to deal with some of the carnage that we see in the facilities. And I have to stress, not everyone in the facility has mental health issues. If you read our policy closely, you'll see we have cross-checks and balances in place to have medical evaluation, mental evaluations done within the first 24 hours. The problem we do have is our facilities are old and antiquated, and some of them we do not have 24/7 medical care. We do have new positions for nurses we just got on board. To have that for the 5 facilities we didn't have, those nurses are coming on board now, but we do not have physicians at those facilities 24/7.
I've been following several of the cases in which inmates have taken their own lives over the last few years. I've, of course, met the father of Joey O'Malley. I know department can't comment on current existing cases. And of course, I followed the case of, his name is Jimo Gatoyan, who took his own life at All Community Correctional Center. Do you think that if we were to have these sorts of processes in place in which we collected Vader data, assisted your department in essentially ending administrative segregation, assisted your department in moving individuals throughout facilities, we could have avoided some of these incidences?
I'm unable to discuss individual cases because of litigation, but I can tell you this. If you eliminate segregation, you will cause problems for the facility, for the wardens and the watch commanders to manage the facility when emergency conditions or an inmate is assaulted or an inmate assaults a corrections officer. Again, I would ask you thoroughly look at our policy and procedures. Look at the NIC guidelines and ACA guidelines. This bill deviates from national standards. We're not running a country club. Some inmates need to be in certain types of administrative segregation because of their own actions and behaviors. We have cross balances, checks and cross balances in place to do medical and physical evaluations of them, for them to be evaluated within 24 hours of going into segregation, and for the facilities to provide weekly reports to us of those folks in segregation. So I would think this bill goes too far because it eliminates our ability to appropriately manage and react to situations where we need to make a decision almost immediately for the life and protection of that person or other inmates or staff.
Is there an appeal process for individuals or inmates who are sent to administrative segregation?
Yes, if you look at the policy we provided to you earlier, all the forms are there, all the processes are there, and there is an adjudication process.
That said, I'm concerned about the overcrowding of certain facilities instead of others. We all know about the overcrowding of, say, the Hilo Community Correctional Center and the temporary units that they created through COVID and through some other places. Would you say that those violate existing best practices?
I would say that overcrowding doesn't necessarily create inhumane conditions. However, the conditions of the facility itself, like HCCC, because it's old and antiquated, we got 3 people to a cell, somebody sleeping next to a toilet, that's cruel and unusual punishment. But you have to understand, we have to take everyone that is sent to us. We do not have a choice. We cannot say we're all full, we turn them away. Our overcrowding is in our jails, not our prisons. Our overcrowding is our sentence misdemeanors and pretrial. We have people in custody who have $10, $15, $25, $50 bail who can't bail out. That is ridiculous. We're paying $253 to $260 a day. We have people in our custody who have mental health issues, and I can assure you, jails are the least effective, most costly option for people with mental health issues, but we don't have a choice. We have to take them. So if we want to deal with this issue, we need to deal with it as a whole. Jail diversion at the first point of contact with police, diversion at the first appearance before the judge, diversion if they come to us for supervision, and then diversion if they come to our custody. We have to have the ability to divert them somewhere else. And we do have a number of people who have mental health issues in our facilities who do not belong there. And had it not been for their mental health issues, they wouldn't be there. I'll give you an example. A person with mental health issues commits a misdemeanor crime, quality life crime, urinating on the street, walking on the street naked, something minor. They get arrested, they go to court. They get continued, they don't show up. They don't show up because they're off their medication. They're probably living under a bridge. A warrant is issued, they come to custody, they get bailed, they can't bail out. we have to keep them in custody. That's where, if we want to do jail diversion, we want to address this issue of overcrowding, it needs to be done up front and at every contact point throughout the criminal justice system. And that is not happening today.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
I think we're hearing some of the pretrial bills next week.
Yep.
So you'll have an opportunity to have this full conversation
Okay.
once more.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions, members? If not, I have a question. Director, thank you for sharing the Corrections Administration policy and procedures for administrative segregation and disciplinary segregation that you referred to. I was curious, this, I think, was done back in 2013, 2014?
2014.
2014. Is there any, when will it be updated? I mean, it's 10 years. I figure there must have been some updates from the national practices since then. What's the schedule for updating this?
We're currently updating all our policies and procedures to reflect our change from public safety to the DCR. At that point is when we'll do a deep dive into the policies to see if there are changes. But we do have a policy office. When there are major changes, they go through the policies. So I can say with a 98% certainty that there have been no major changes to the national standards in the 9 years.
How do the national standards incorporate recommendations like from the American Bar Association, or their recommendation that only 15 days max, and others that were mentioned in testimony here? Are any of those sort of recommendations from other professionals included in updates from the National Institute of Corrections or the American Correctional Association?
I couldn't say either way. Each of those organizations have committees. Those committees are made up mainly of folks who are in the criminal justice, who are work in the criminal justice system. They could be prosecutors' office, they could be public defenders, I'm just not sure. But I think if you look at our policy and procedures when you go through, I think you'll see that there's a cross-check and balance in place for those reviews to take place within 24 hours, then 72 hours, and then every week thereafter.
Thank you. You've got these rules in place, but it sounds like anecdotally that the rules are not always followed. How do you ensure that the rules are going to be followed in all of the institutions under your responsibility?
If you look, we provided as part of the attachments, there are weekly reports that they have to provide to us, the leadership of the department. If we see that there is an issue or we have a concern, then we will either go to the facility or speak with the warden to look at that to make sure that the person's not being treated unfairly. And it is a policy. Violation of policy is a disciplinary issue for the person who violates the policy after we complete an investigation. So if it is the committee's inclination to change the law, I would ask that you change the law based on best practices from NIC and ACA, and you incorporate the language of our policy and procedures into the statute, because it does follow best practices.
Okay. Are the facilities, for example, that are the private facility in Saguaro, are they required to follow your procedures?
They're required to follow our policies and procedures, but they do have their own policies and procedures. So in order to ensure that they follow the scope of services of the contract, we have a contract monitor on the ground that works in the facility 8 hours a day, 40 days, 40 hours a week, and we conduct quarterly inspections of the facility. We send our healthcare professionals down, food service professionals, case managers. We send our security folks down to make sure that they're living up to the scope of services and that they're not violating our policies or their own. And I had fined Core Civic last year for violating their staffing requirements, $68,000.
Okay. And last question, which is really more just getting down to, well, I want to address some of the issues that we heard from one of our testifiers where somebody who was in this segregated confinement wasn't even provided a book, and it's driving people crazy. What would be the reason for somebody not to be provided a reading material?
We do have library carts that go around to the cells, and the inmates are asked if they want to borrow a book or not. So I'm not familiar with that particular case. I don't have the name, but if I have the name, we can go back and look. But I can assure you, I have not seen one case where someone has been in administrative or disciplinary segregation for 85 days. Administrative segregation, yes, for their own protection. Disciplinary segregation, no.
What about this issue where they were in, one type of segregation during 30 days and then they switch to another for 30 days and they end up basically being in, I know you don't call it solitary confinement, but they basically end up being in solitary confinement for much longer time.
I think if you look at our policy, that is not possible. That would violate our policy. And I would ask that testifier to provide the name of the person or persons so we can go back and double check, but I have not seen one case like that.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, members? Thank you very much, Director, and thank you to all the testifiers on this measure. I appreciate your being here. Let's move on to the next item. House Bill 2227, HD1, relating to childcare. This measure expands the existing state exemption for U.S. Department of Defense certified childcare providers to those operating off federal property. Requires those Department of Defense certified childcare facilities with clients who are not children of enlisted families or who receive a childcare subsidy from the Department of Human Services to have a memorandum of agreement with the Department of Human Services. First up, we have testimony from the Department of Human Services. Welcome. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Dana Luca with the Department of Human Services on behalf of Director Betts. We stand on our written testimony offering comments and amendments. I'm available for any questions. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. As I always do in this committee, I always ask the testifiers to summarize or give us the highlights of your testimony because not everyone reads the testimony, and that way public knows what's going on. Please, if you could summarize and provide the highlights.
Sure. So the department supports the proposed language in HB 2227 HD1 for a memorandum of agreement to be established between the Department of Defense and DHS regarding the operation of a child care facility when non-affiliated DoD families who receive a child care subsidy from DHS is enrolled. We also respectfully request technical amendment in Section 2 to move to add the paragraphs 4 and 5 to the end of the list. And we request an extended effective date to give DHS and DoD program administrators time to compare and analyze each other's standards and requirements to form the basis of a memorandum of agreement.
Thank you. And just so for the listeners, your reason for wanting to change the order of the paragraphs, and you want to put the new paragraphs at the end of the list, I think this is useful for us to understand. This will assist the workers who are trained and rely upon the current numbering in response to inquiries. So it wouldn't change they know that, paragraph 4 is this and paragraph 5 is this, and they know that by memory. So we don't want to mess that up. So you're wanting to put the new ones at the end so that they can learn those additional ones, but not get confused with the ones they've already memorized.
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's very helpful. Okay, thanks very much for your explanation.
Thank you.
Next, we have testimony and support from the U.S. Department of Defense, Pacific and Southwest Region. Please proceed, Kelly Mae Douglas.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Kelly Mae Douglas. I'm here on behalf of the U.S. Department of Defense in support of HB 2227. I want to say up front, very much appreciate working with DHS on refining the language so that we can get it right for our families. Just want to say by exempting that family child care providers that are certified by the military services from state licensure and registration that is duplicative of the certification that they already received, Hawaii has the opportunity to enhance the quality of life and economic security of both the providers and military families seeking qualified child care options. If permitted by their services regulations under HB 2227, This approach would allow them to work immediately after being certified, inspected, and approved by the installation commander to provide care to children of military families. Just one point as far as a potential amendment. The language currently states that this would apply only to DoD certified child care providers serving enlisted families, and I've discussed this with DHS as well. We'd like to change that to those providers serving DoD affiliated families, as not all of eligible patrons are enlisted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the Hawaii Military Affairs Council and testimony and support from the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2227 HD1? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, thank you very much to the testifiers. We'll move on to the next measure. House Bill 2253, House Draft 1, relating to health. This measure permits law enforcement officers to carry an opioid antagonist while on duty. It requires funds for the purchase of opioid antagonists used by law enforcement officers employed by a county to be paid for using that county's general revenues or share of any opioid litigation proceeds. It authorizes law enforcement officers to administer an opioid antagonist. It establishes immunity for law enforcement officers who administer an opioid antagonist during an opioid-related drug overdose, and permits the Department of Health to establish education and training for law enforcement personnel. It authorizes the Department of Health to require all restaurants and hotel establishments to maintain an inventory of an opioid antagonist. First up, we have testimony from the Department of Law Enforcement. Next, we have testimony from the Hawaii State Department of Health. Next, testimony from the Honolulu Police Department. Don Manzano, Acting Captain. Please proceed.
I am Don Manzano, Acting Captain, Training Division, Honolulu Police Department. I'm sorry, good afternoon, Chair Thomas and members. The HPD supports Bill 2253, and we stand by our testimony. I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'll be open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from the Hawaii Public Health Institute. Peggy Merzwa. Welcome.
Hi.
Please
Good
proceed.
afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Peggy Merzwa with the Hawaii Public Health Institute. We stand in support of this measure. Just to quickly summarize, it's simple to administer, fast-acting, and life-saving. And city and county now requires managers at bar establishments to have somebody trained to administer Narcan, and it saved a life. So, we stand in strong support of the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2253 HD1? Yes, Ms. Young, please proceed. And you can just focus on your testimony on the bill, and you don't have to summarize the bill. It's okay.
Excuse me, I'm so hungry. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES. It was like a really automatic thing. My bad.
Please testify.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I like this measure because, and CARES is in strong support because of what Peggy said, that there is also the county enacting the law about opiate antagonists, okay? And it's Narcan. So if we look at Bill 28.
Let's focus on this bill, please.
Okay. So CARES' point is just that if the U.S. HHS has declared that it's a national emergency, the opioid crisis, and that we must address the opioid crisis, then by state law, you should define the opiate antagonist and also to match the county policies. And so fentanyl and oxycodone, opiates, these are Schedule II substances, okay? Schedule II at the federal level is very dangerous Schedule 1 are drugs such as methylene deoxymethamphetamine, MDMA,
Just focus on the bill,
and
please.
marijuana. So it is something that we have to get to the root of. And this measure is good because it's a balance, right? If there's going to be a punishment for those who abuse opiates, the state is also going to try to work on the antidote, right? So this is a good measure, and we are in strong support.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure, HB 2253 HD1? If not, questions, members? I have a question for Ms. Merswa.
Yes, Chair.
It's not clear who's expected to administer these opioid antagonists at hotels and restaurants. But you made mention of that in your testimony because of the city and county ordinance. Could you explain that briefly?
So in the city and county ordinance, they identified a individual, obviously at a hotel, it could be several individuals who would be on duty at the time to be able to be trained in order to administer. So in the city and county ordinance, they just identified a title of someone there they could turn to.
Okay. And then how do we address the issue of what the inventory should be? It's ambiguous and it's not defined in the bill.
Ambiguous. That's a great question, Chair. I would imagine there are probably numbers, ratio, but I don't have a good answer for you on that one for ratio.
Is that addressed in the city and county of Honolulu's ordinance?
No, it's not.
Okay. I would ask you to think about it and maybe as this bill, if the committee decides to move forward with this bill, that we would be able to help define what that available inventory should be in order to meet the needs of that facility.
Yeah, I will look into that too, and if I discover something
Just let us know.
brilliant, let you know, yes.
Let us know. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions, members? If not, thanks very much. Thank you to all the testifiers. Let's move on to the next measure. House Bill 2526 HD1 relating to motor vehicles. This measure increases penalties for certain offenses relating to the unauthorized driving or operation of motor vehicles. On this measure, we have testimony from the Office of the Public Defender. Welcome, please proceed.
Good afternoon again, Deputy Public Defender Taryn Tomas on behalf of the Office of the Public Defender. The office strongly opposes this bill. This would disproportionately increase penalties from a misdemeanor to a Class C and a Class B felony. 5 years for a Class C on a third offense of driving without license, and 10 years a Class B felony for a fourth offense of driving without license. This type of measure would not curb the conduct, but would perpetuate the cause of it. Most individuals who receive these types of citations want to get their driver's license, but what has happened in the past is that they had default judgments issued against them on something as silly and as minor as expired safety check. Once these default judgments go into collections, the interest are compounded, and the fines that start small are exponential, and that triggers a license stopper, which perpetuates the cycle. As a prior testifier testified today, there's people who are incarcerated who can't afford $25 bail, $50 bail. Right now, a misdemeanor is a $1,000 fine and up to a year in jail. This measure would take away sentencing discretion from the district court judge. It would send these matters up to circuit court. It would effectively clog the circuit court with driving without license cases, which are nonviolent, oftentimes have no impact on anybody else. This would sustain the cycle of poverty. It would also create imprisoning parents. It would take away jobs. It would just disproportionately impact those who are already struggling to make ends meet. Right now, the current penalty of a year in jail and up to a $2,000 fine with the discretion of the sentencing judge is adequate to address this type of conduct. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in support from Kim Coco Iwamoto. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Tarnas. I'm testifying as a mom of a young person who takes the bus, who has to walk 2 blocks and then catches the bus to go to her Chinese class and then walks another 2 blocks. So this is about, I think, it's my understanding that this bill was drafted in response to Sarah Yara, who was run down in a crosswalk by a driver who was unlicensed. And I personally agree with a lot of what the Public Defender's Office said. I actually feel that this bill is well-intentioned but doesn't hit its mark. Actually, I think the correct bill would be HB 1562, which is right after this one, which to me targets what I think the community wants more of. But also, what this bill right now is missing is a more common sense approach to how do you stop, or how do you, when mandatory minimums and the elevated sentencing, when it doesn't actually deter behavior. And the behavior we want here are people who aren't licensed to drive to not go driving a car. And what we want actually is when police pull over a person and discover that they are unlicensed, not just that their license is in another purse or another pocket, pant, but actually they are unlicensed, that the cops should not let the driver then drive away from the stop, which currently is what's happening. So from what I understand is that the police, when they stop, it's because the law doesn't specify that they need to get the car towed or give the unlicensed driver an opportunity to call a friend who has a license to get their car to a safe spot. There are other solutions to separate the unlicensed driver from the vehicle. And I also think that on the second conviction of driving while unlicensed, if the individual driver who's unlicensed is driving that same car from the previous conviction, the owner of the car should be forced to sign an affidavit by the judge that says, I affirm and know that the individual driving the car was not licensed. I know that I may be subject to a fine. I know that I may have my car on the third conviction, taken away by the state, and it could be sold. If the person who actually has title to the car, which may be a car company, right? They might hold the title because the car is making, the person who owns the car is making payments. Then the title holder of the car will go, you know what, I need to repossess that car because the car may be subject to asset forfeiture. So let me proactively act in a way to preserve my asset and separate the car from the driver. Same goes for if the individual, the unlicensed driver is, say, living with their elderly parents, and they're like, oh my God, how do we stop our adult child from taking the car? Then they might feel pressured to actually sell the car, or that could be an option too. But it actually makes them engage proactively with separating the unlicensed driver from the vehicle in question. So we hope that would, and I think it gets closer to being addressed in the second bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. And next we have testimony and support from Beverly Heiser. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2526, House Draft 1? If not, questions, members? No? Thank you. Thank you very much to all the testifiers. Let's move on to that next bill that was just foreshadowed in testimony from Ms. Iwamoto, so thanks for that. House Bill 1562 HD1, relating to driving without a license. This measure adds forfeiture of a vehicle as a maximum penalty on a third conviction for operating a motor vehicle without a license within a 5-year period. First up, we have testimony from the Department of Transportation. In support. Next, testimony from the Office of the Public Defender. In opposition. Please proceed.
And good afternoon again, Deputy Public Defender Taryn Tomasa on behalf of the Office of the Public Defender. The office strongly opposes this measure. vehicle forfeiture for a third offense or on would not solve the problem. A number of people, a great number of people who receive these citations are not the registered owner of the vehicle. So forfeiting the vehicle, putting them in impound lots begs the question of which agency is going to be taking it and what happens when the case is dismissed. The state would be liable for any damage to the vehicle, to the property within it, especially if it was found that it was an illegal stop or there wasn't enough evidence to sustain the case. There's also unforeseen circumstances that this may have impact on other people. I want to clarify in my written testimony that although the registered owner, if that is the person who received the citation, was unlicensed, his house members, his family members may be licensed and use the vehicle lawfully. By impounding this vehicle, it would impact impoverished families who use the vehicle for medical care, for family care, to take their children to school, to go to their own jobs. This part of our society doesn't have the funds to buy a second car or doesn't have a second car. And so by impounding or forfeiting these vehicles, again, it will not solve the problem or curb the conduct. It would only exacerbate the situation. And I also wanted to mention that for a good number of the Office of the Public Defender clients, these vehicles are their homes. By impounding these vehicles, you will take away their homes. It would end up with more people on the street. And I know of clients who received multiple driving without license citations because they are living in their cars and the officer instructs them to move the vehicle and is standing there with the ticket ready to give them and in fact gives it to them, which again results in multiple tickets, multiple citations, and they just dig their hole even deeper and are unable to get their license. The focus should really be on helping people clear up these fines that are in collections, helping them obtain the license clearance so that the individuals who want to be law-abiding, who can be law-abiding with the proper assistance, will become law-abiding with their license. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony of comments from the Honolulu Police Department. Please proceed, Acting Captain Michael Campbell or his representative.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. As you know, my name is Michael Campbell. I'm the acting captain for the traffic division. We submitted written testimony with concerns, and I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Sir, if you could just highlight what your concerns are for the public who didn't have a chance to read your testimony.
Okay, certainly. Our priority, our number one concern is logistics. And basically, if this law does pass, where are we going to store these vehicles? As you know, Oahu is limited in size. Our warehouses are small. We have stored vehicles for larger offense like vehicular homicides and negligent homicides and things like that. Since the beginning of the year, January 1st to today's date, we have issued 49 citations for DWAL, and we've arrested 68 individuals for DWAL. So 68 people were arrested and their vehicles were, they were removed from said vehicle. Now, whether another person picked up the vehicle or it was towed as a traffic hazard, I can't answer to you for that, but rest assured, HPD does not have the storage facility to recover vehicles from people that are driving without license.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And when the Captain Campbell referred to DWAL, it's driving without a license, just for those who aren't aware of that. Okay, thank you very much, Captain.
You're welcome, sir.
Next, we have testimony and support from Karen Chung. Please proceed.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Karen Chung. I am the representative of mothers, 300 of them in the Kaka'ako area, Ward Village Moms. We stand in support of this bill, but with strong recommendation for amendment, which simply is very simple. The current increase of penalty upon conviction will not stop a person unlicensed to repeatedly drive on the street. And what the core issue is that I think we need to understand that this bill will not change anything. And I would like to share, if I can show, for example, if you get pulled over on day one, you go drive unlicensed, and we need to be very clear that unlicensed meaning that you were not qualified to operate a vehicle. You don't have a license.
Focus this way, the camera will get that.
Okay.
So that way.
And then you get pulled over by the police. Unfortunately, you know, based on the current system, I believe that a lot of these people get ticket and then they resume on the road and drive away. And then let's say we rely on 1562 and 2526 HB to catch them upon conviction. We know that our court system is heavily overloaded, and this is the thing that we can't solve overnight. This gap that we see right now would still allow a driver to go back out there with a vehicle and kill someone. The bill will not change. If Sarah were to be alive today, she would still be killed, despite how heavy the penalty become. That is very clear, right? If you don't have a license to drive an airplane, you don't let that person resume back to the airplane and drive the airplane away, right? So it's very simple. What is the most effective way to eliminate that? And that is the gap. And that's two things. By the first touch point by the Honolulu police, two things we ask. Okay, we don't impound, but upon a police officer pull out someone, you know, on the street, they must have been driving crazy, that there must be some probable cause that they pull them over. And once they're identified that they're unlicensed, that person cannot resume driving away. They're not qualified. They don't have a license. It's unlicensed. It's not about forgetting your license in their pocket. You cannot let that person resume. And if that person cannot resume, then we need to have that vehicle moved to the corner, somewhere safe for retrieval by a licensed driver. It reduces public danger right away. I understand that, you know, when you're impound, we talk about asset forfeiture, we're worried about, you know, they can't pay, and then it's the only vehicle that the family depends on to go to work. Those are valid things, you know, all the economical thing we need to consider. But we're lives we're talking about. Sarah's dead. She's reduced to dust. What an inconvenient, right? So, and also to address to HPD, you know, for the past 3 weeks, you know, as mothers, we're civilians. We've been running around like crazy. We talk to DOT, we talk to city council, we talk to the House representative. Everyone understood that, hey, there is a gap. There is a gap. No matter if we increase the penalty for unlicensed driving to death penalty, it will not stop because there is a gap. There is a gap. And the best intervention that we could have is by the police department, empower them by the law and say that, hey, number one, you can't let them continue driving because they're unlicensed, they're not qualified. And then number two, get that vehicle somewhere else.
Thank you.
And there are 48 tow companies currently active on the island of Oahu.
Thank you. Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
testimony. Appreciate it. Next, we have testimony from Kim Koko Imoto.
I think I said everything I wanted to share earlier. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from Shevlin Saniatan. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. My name is Shevlin Saniatan. I am here today to give you my testimony. I am in support with amendment. My daughter, Sarah Yara, made 1 year yesterday of her death from an unlicensed driver that hit and ran and left the scene. My daughter was on a marked crosswalk on her way to school. She was only 16 years old, had a future. I was later informed that this person that they apprehended was waiting for a trial. He was pulled over in January before he killed my daughter for driving without a license. We let that guy go. Not only did he get pulled over for the 12th time, and there was nothing done. He was not put into jail. We keep unlicensed driver driving on the street. We need to give the police department some right to at least give them the right to take away the vehicle, at least to tow it away. We talk about, no place to put the vehicle. But you know where my daughter is now? In a box. She's in a box. Her twin had to witness that. And all she wants is justice, and she wants the law to be changed so that people on the street don't have to go through what her and I had to go through. I'm not saying put everybody in jail. I'm not saying, okay, have some compassion. But the habitual people that continue to drive without a license and doesn't care about the law, that's what I'm asking you to do. To make it right for our communities, that we can save more lives. You guys want to use Sarah's name? Make a difference. You guys want to use this bill to put her name on? Then make a difference that will honor her. She's no longer here. So let's honor my daughter.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in, and I know it's very difficult. The committee extends our deepest sympathies to you for the tragedy that you've had to experience. We have testimony and support from Beverly Heiser and from Michelle West. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1562 HD1? Yes, please come up, introduce yourself, and please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, committee members, Carrie-Ann Chirota on behalf of the ACL of Hawaii. Just very difficult to hear the testimony, and I'm so sorry for you and your family as a mother. But I also have to switch and wear another hat as well for the ACLU, and we are looking at protecting civil rights and liberties enshrined in our Constitution. And there is a principle by the U.S. Supreme Court, other courts, about proportionality, and that there can be a violation of the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, if there's excessive sentencing. And so we want to just bring up, there have been another of bills that you've passed most recently, and I think that it relates to this. Having worked previously for Maui reintegration program, helping men and women transition from jail and prison into the community, a number of people who were driving without license repeatedly, especially in rural communities on Maui, some of them may have had their license, some of them may have not because they didn't have the money to pay to get their license, or they didn't have a car to take to get their license. For some other individuals, they were driving without a license because maybe they didn't have enough money to pay for insurance, and they got stopped, and it starts accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. And so then there's a license stopper that's placed, and that's why they're driving without a license. And I think we need to get to root of the conduct. This tragic case of Sarah, in that instance, from what I understand, and I'm not privy to all of the facts of that case, I understand that individual was speeding. I don't know if he was under the influence, but I understand that he's being charged with negligent homicide, collision, including death, which is a sentence up to a Class B felony. So I believe that there are some measures in place in statute under our penal code to address that conduct that resulted in the tragic death of her daughter. But just driving without a license in and of itself, even though we know it's not something the ideal situation, that doesn't automatically mean someone is killed. I think we need to look at the underlying conduct. And I just want to leave this, again, a real story. 2 years ago, we held a clinic on Maui called the Road to Redemption, helping people to implement this license stoppage bill that all of you passed, that people moving away from debt-free justice. Some people just don't have the money to clear, and so they can't get their license. A number of the people who came to the event were single moms. Single mothers who didn't have the money, and that's why they didn't have a valid license. But they needed help. They needed advocates in the room, attorneys, to help them navigate that process. And we also got a generous donor to help pay for the fees to get their abstracts to clear it. It was a process. So the vast many people who get charged or convicted of driving without a license, it's not because they're just flagrantly trying to violate the law, many of whom are poverty. And I would like to add also, for a number of women, as well as could be men, who are victims of domestic violence, there's a situation where their partners or husbands prohibit them, block them from getting a driver's license. So when you look at this policy, we need to think about the intended and unintended consequences. If you pursue this and do the forfeiture, it could result in a single mom having her vehicle taken away. She can't get her kids to school. She can't get her kids to seek medical treatment, which that mom on Maui said that every time her Kiki, who was sick and had asthma, she was always afraid that she, on her way to take her child to the one hospital on our island, which was far from where she lived, and we have very limited bus service, that she would run the risk of getting arrested by police, not to mention our houseless neighbors. So again, my apologies and condolences to the family, but I think we need to take a look at the sort of public policy and who would be likely swept if we pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would urge you to submit written testimony if you're able to. We can include that in our collection of testimony. Anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1562 HD1? Yes, please introduce yourself. Proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, members of the committee. My name is Ruth O, Deputy Attorney General, and the department did not submit new comments on this occasion, but I just wanted to mention that I am here and available in the event that the committee is considering any further amendments or revisions or further discussion on this matter. The Transportation Committee had received earlier testimony and comments from the department, and this House Draft 1 is a result of that. So we had no other comments to make at this time. Thank you.
Okay. So no other comments on this House Draft 1? Okay.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? If not, questions, members? No? Yes? I mean, I've got questions, but if you want to go for it. Representative Gannon.
To the Honolulu Police Department.
Captain Campbell, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed. Representative Gannon.
Before I ask my question, I'd just like to give my condolences to the family of Sarah Yara. Ms. Sunny, it's nice to see you. Thank you for your bravery in coming here today before your state House of Representatives, and to all the individuals who have come before us today, and to the mothers that have organized on behalf of advocacy for safe streets. I don't even want to think about what would happen if something happened to my daughter. It's crazy stuff. I just know that we're people too, and we're here just trying to craft good laws after hearing testimony from not just you folks, but like agencies as well, trying to do the most we can for the entire state. To the Honolulu Police Department, you mentioned earlier that 68 individuals were arrested for driving without a license. I'm assuming those individuals had other charges. What kind of tools are at the disposal to the police when they pull over an individual and find that they are in violation of not just driving without a license, but another potential traffic crime? Can they detain? Can they impound? And under what kind of circumstances that happens?
Okay, so to answer your question, sir, last year alone, 428 people were charged for DWAL. So they were arrested we issued, based on my stats here, is 223 citations for DWAL. Out of those 428 people that were arrested, 13 were not charged. So basically, if you're stopped for some sort of traffic infraction, now this could run the gamut. It could be disregarding a red signal. It could be disregarding a stop sign. It could be used, a police officer could see you not use your blinker. It could be for speeding, things like that. Upon the approach of the initial officer, we generally ask you to see your driver's license, registration, proof of insurance. Now, once those documents are produced, we'll address the infraction that we're pulling you over or the traffic crime that we're pulling you over for. Now, we give every person the opportunity to explain themselves. Maybe they're in a hurry, they're having a medical emergency or something like that. In the event that it's a traffic crime such as DWAL, sir, the officer does have the discretion to issue a citation. The officer does have the discretion to make the arrest. The officer does have the discretion to issue a citation and also tow said vehicle for traffic hazard. If the subject is arrested, if there's another licensed driver in the vehicle, we'll usually allow that person to drive the vehicle away. If there is no other licensed driver in said vehicle, we will tow vehicle because it's a traffic hazard. Depending on each circumstances, and please keep in mind, sir, that this is the officer's discretion. Sometimes we do park the vehicle in a parking spot, a legal parking spot, to prevent somebody from hitting the vehicle. And other times we do tow the vehicle, and it really depends on each traffic stop and the interaction with the operator of the vehicle.
That said, does an officer, when they detain an individual, if they get their name, let's say they don't have a form of identification, but they do get a name, can they, of course, search that individual's name? I'm talking about specifically the defendant that was implicated, Mr. Miyashiro, in the Yara case. So would it have been possible for an officer to search him on your portal and then make a decision based on detainment there, based on the previous incidences of driving without a license?
Yep. Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. If you could speak a little bit closer to your microphone, I think I caught everything that you were saying. But to answer your question, in that particular case, had the officer stopped this driver for speeding, Mr. Miyashiro, the officer would address the speeding, and if Mr. Miyashiro wasn't able to produce identification, whether it's a Hawaii state ID or another ID from another state, or a Hawaii driver's license, operator's license, or another driver's license from another state, then we would make subsequent checks via our police dispatch. Our police dispatch goes into the database, the statewide database or the national database, to determine whether or not this person is a licensed driver.
And then based on the search of that database, if there are numerous instances of driving without a license, does the officer have discretion to detain?
Well, the officer certainly at that point, this is an investigative stop. This is an investigative traffic stop, which means that as long as we are actively investigating, then yes, we can detain somebody. We cannot detain somebody just because we want to detain them. We cannot detain a person out of punishment, sir. Basically, if we determine this person doesn't have ID on them, they're giving us a name. If the name matches up with our database, the date of birth, the social security number, the physical description of the individual, which is all said by our dispatch or by our computer system, then we can either issue the citation, we could make the arrest, and it's really up to the officer at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, officer.
You're welcome,
Thank you. Any other questions, members? If not, could I ask the public defender, Ms. Tomasa? So if someone is a repeat offender driving without a license, what are the options for sentencing that the prosecutor could request and the judge could impose?
The judge could could sentence them to the full year of incarceration. If there's more than one offense, so they're a repeat offender and say they didn't take care of a prior citation, they could implement consecutive sentencing. The court
Which would result in practically what?
would be 2 years.
2 years.
Could be up to 2 years, or if they have multiple, it could just be back to back. They could also be fined. The ability to obtain a license with any type of traffic violation, ticket that you're adjudicated or convicted of, the court could impose classes that you would have to take before you could get your license. So there's a myriad of different types of penalties and punishments that the court could impose.
So when we hear situations where individuals who are repeat offenders who don't get incarceration, don't get any of these penalties, is that because either the prosecutor didn't ask for it or the judge chose not to impose those?
Ultimately, the sentencing decisions are within the court's discretion. So if the prosecutor asked for the jail and the court decided otherwise, that's the reason why the person wasn't sentenced to jail.
Okay, but the law does give the authority to the courts to impose those sentences that you just described, incarceration, et cetera. So the law itself has these strong penalties already in it.
That's correct.
So it's really up to the judges to do their job in cases where it merits it to impose these harsh sentences.
That's correct. And I think you have to also keep in mind that in a situation, if the person has not shown up for court or not taken care of it, so a bench warrant would issue and that particular ticket would not be addressed or that case would not be addressed. So maybe the court didn't have a chance to address that particular case.
Okay, but I guess the point I'm trying to get across here and that to have you confirm is that in fact the law has harsh sentences that are available, but it's really up to the court to be able to use that authority in the appropriate case if it merits it.
That's correct. The court also has probation officers, court officers who can do a background study on the individual to determine whether imprisonment is justified or recommended, or whether fines or whether additional classes are the appropriate sentence. But the court does have the discretion from a third offense on to sentence up to a year of imprisonment.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, members? If not, thank you very much. Thank you very much to our testifiers who came today. And a special thank you to you, ma'am, and for coming with your heavy heart and the loss of your daughter. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's move on, members, to the next measure. House Bill 2354, House Draft 1, relating to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board. This clarifies that the Small Business Regulatory Review Board has the authority to review legislation affecting small businesses in response to a request from small business owners. On this measure, first up, we have testimony and support from the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Yes, please introduce yourself and proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm Dori Palkovich. I work at DBED. I'm also the administrator for the Small Business Regulatory Review Board. DBED stands on its testimony that clarification of it being, the board being able to review and provide testimony from small businesses on legislation.
So according to your testimony, the changes that are proposed in this measure are expected to clarify the board's power to avoid any misinterpretations?
That's correct, yes. The Deputy AG suggested that we put this in the statute, so there's no questions about it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you.
Next, we have testimony and support from the Small Business Regulatory Review Board. Mary Alberts?
Hi.
Chair? Yes, please
thank you.
proceed.
Thank you. Again, Mary Alberts, the Chair of the Small Business Regulatory Review Board. We are in support of this bill. We've had requests from small businesses in the past to offer support in this manner, so we are in full support of it.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2354 HD1? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, let's move on. Thank you. Next, House Bill 2772 HD1 relating to the state seal. This requires the use of modern Hawaiian orthography, including the kahako and okina on the state seal, and provides that valid representations of the seal created before this act shall remain valid. First up, we have testimony from Luann Mahiki Langford Favorito, and testimony from, that's it. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2772 HD1? Please proceed. Please focus on the bill.
Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES in strong support. So this measure will set forth a policy to recognize the importance
We know what the testimony, just focus on what your opinions are about the bill.
So CARES is in strong support of Okinas and the Hawaiian language because it's important to our culture as a melting pot state. And aside from the Hawaiian language, why are Okinas important? What's the right way to say Hawaii? Is it Hawaii or Hawaii? And what does the apostrophe-like mark mean in Hawaii? The little mark is called the okina, and it's actually an official consonant in the Hawaiian language. It represents what's called a galato stop. To practice pronouncing the okina, you can say the word uh-oh. The break between the syllables is the same kind of break you insert when you see okinas.
Thank you.
And so, for example, the okinas are important because it not only alters the pronunciation of the word, but it can also change the meaning of the word.
Yes.
For example, ko means yours, and ko'u
So you think
means
the bill's a good
mine.
idea?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's important to include okinas in the Hawaiian language.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2772 HD1? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, let's move on. House Bill 2736 relating to state gesture. This adopts, establishes, and designates the shaka as the official gesture of the state. On this measure, we have Steve Sue. Mr. Sue, you're very patient. I appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate you guys allowing me to testify today.
Oh,
Aloha,
we're
Chair.
Glad to have you here. You sound like quite an expert in this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hope so. So thanks for having me here today. Steve Sue, Kaimuki resident. I have been working on a film on the shaka gesture for 5 years now, so I know a bit about it. But I will summarize our position on the bill. I do support it without question. This is not a fluff bill. This is very important. And what I've discovered through the last 5 years is that if we don't save this for Hawaii, then there are other states that have moves afoot to adopt it. Nevada being one. There's a lot of expats there that live in Nevada from Hawaii, and they like this shaka gesture for the state of Nevada. There's also a move afoot in California because of their surf culture. Now, both of those cultures are derivative of Hawaii. They seek to be part of our gang. In fact, in the making of the film, many of our interviewees, I interviewed over 60 kapuna and other experts on the shaka, and many of them jokingly say it's a gang sign. It is a gang sign. It's, hey gang, you're part of Hawaii. So the rest of the world really wants to be part of our gang. If we do not adopt this bill, then it becomes open season for anyone, anywhere in the world to adopt it. So the stakes here are that if we don't adopt it, there are many companies here that provide livings for people in the state of Hawaii through apparel, food products, logo merchandise, swag, souvenirs. I challenge anyone to go into an ABC store and not see a shaka. So you imagine how much prosperity that creates for this community here. Shaka Tea out of Hilo, Hawaii. It's a 9-year-old startup. They come out of nowhere. They make mamaki tea. They call themselves Shaka Tea, and they're in over 4,000 stores in the United States now. They carry our brand. The shaka is our brand. I looked at all of the state official symbols. There are 24 of them currently. If we do frogs, that's a 25th. So the shaka is potentially one of those, but I would submit to you that it is probably the most intuitive and meaningful symbol in all nations, whether you speak English or not, on the concept of the Aloha spirit and Hawaii. So this is why I urge you guys to adopt this this bill. Now, there was a hearing yesterday in the Senate side. There's a companion bill, Senate 3312, and they adopted on their single committee to pass this bill on their side with 2 amendments, one of which was to add language in the bill that Hamana Kalili is the originator of the shaka. He's a gentleman that lived in Laie and was there. He passed away in 1958. But we actually, through the film, have dated him back to 1912 and the loss of fingers then. So there is a very clear, like if this was a court of law and you presented all the different theories as to how the shaka started, undeniably the weight of evidence that is actually factual through newspaper clippings, everything, it goes to this particular story. So the Senate wants to add that language, and I don't want you guys to be blindsided that they're having this amendment. I think if you adopt this on your side, that this would be a good idea to consider the language, because I fully support that Hamana Kalili should be recognized as the originator of the shaka. Secondly, Senator Lee had an idea that we should erect a state shaka symbol in a highly public location. I also support that. I think it would be relevant to protecting the shaka for Hawaii, to shout to the world that it is from here. It's not just a law, and we have an actionable way to make it effective for our state. So thank you for allowing me here today. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Su. Members, we have testimony and support from numerous individuals. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on HB 2736 HD1? Yes, please testify on the bill.
Angela Melody
And you don't have to
Young,
tell us what a shaka is.
in strong support on behalf of CARES.
Thank you.
So
Oh,
this act
sorry, I thought you were done. Go
will
ahead,
set
please.
forth a statutory provision. It's never going to be short, okay?
We know what the bill is.
So it sets forth a provision to designate the shaka as the official gesture, okay? And the shaka is an expression of friendly messages and more. And as the story goes, the ubiquitous gesture goes back to the early 1900s when Hamana Kalili worked at Kahuku Sugar Mill. He operated the presser to feed the sugarcane machine. And one day, Kalili's right hand got smashed and caught, and his middle and index and ring fingers were crushed, and it was amputated. So after the accident, the plantation owners made Kalili a security guard for the train, which ran between Sunset Beach and
Ms. Young,
Ka'ava.
do you think that this is a good bill?
Yes,
Okay, good.
I do.
Okay, we don't need to hear the history. We appreciate your storytelling skills, but
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else wishing to testify on the bill? If not, questions, members? I have a question for Mr. Su, since you're our local expert in this. One recommendation that I had received, that we should define or describe the shaka, since it's not anywhere in this measure. Do you have a description? Because, I mean, we got some language I could base it on.
Yes, comment description is a
You don't have to tell us, but if you could, I mean, you could tell us.
Yeah.
I'd like it in writing also.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I mean, visually, we know what it is, but, you know, I want to put it into words.
Yes.
So if you have something you could provide to us, maybe you could describe it now and provide
Sure.
us in writing, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure. So yes, the shaka is a hand gesture that is described as 3 middle fingers being in, so the pinky and the thumb are extended. They are representative of the man that lost the 3 middle fingers in an accident. We don't know exactly what that accident was, but it is that gesture. Sometimes it is, this is called backside. So when the palm is inward, there's also front side, which the palm is outward. And it depends on the historical time period that you look at the shaka. This was originally called Hamada DA, which stood for District Attorney. There's a long lineage. I'm not going to tell you the whole story if you want it later. But some people shake it, some people don't. Depends on what part of the island you're asking people from. People on the windward side actually take great offense to you shaking it. So I would say if you stick to the 3 fingers in, pinky out, thumb out, you're pretty close. And Henry Capono wrote a song for a film called Shaka Man, and it literally is thumb and the pinky.
So if I could read what we're thinking about using it close to this, the shaka generally consists of extending the thumb and smallest finger while holding the 3 middle fingers curled and gesturing in salutation while presenting the front or back of the hand. The wrist may be rotated back and forth for emphasis.
Beautiful.
That
No wonder you're
close?
the legislator.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
pretty
gorgeous.
close. So I just wanted to confirm that we're at least pretty close.
You're right in there. You're right in the ballpark.
All right, thank you very much. Any other
Mahalo.
questions, members? Of course, Representative
Yeah, it's
Gannon.
Friday afternoon. As you've seen, Mr. Sue, this committee hears some fairly significant pieces of legislation, sometimes pretty heavy, right?
Oh, man, I tell you, it's been heavy in
So I
here.
guess this is a fun one. Should we also include the mini shaka? Or the double shaka?
Yeah, these are derivatives. Baby shaka, there's, yeah,
So we don't
double
need
shakas.
to copyright the derivatives. We're good with the description that the chair mentioned.
Yeah, we're not looking for a copyright because that's actually a legal designation, but we're just looking for an adoption of the gesture being a state symbol.
As like the merging signal.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, members? If not, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sue, and thank you to everyone else who testified in this. Next, House Bill 1861 HD1 relating to number plates. This requires license plates issued on or after January 1st, 2025 to include Okina in the word Hawaii, authorizes the use of all uppercase letters, all lowercase letters, or initial capital letters in motor vehicle license plates. First up, we have testimony from the City and County of Honolulu Department of Customer Services. Next, we have testimony and support from the County of Hawaii, Office of the Mayor, and testimony in opposition from Sharon Van Duzen. Anyone else wishing to testify in HB 1861 HD1? If not, questions, members? To nobody around? Seeing none, we'll move on. We've already done HB 1889 relating to state snails. Final bill on our agenda, HB 1950 relating to Kimchi Day. Designates November 22nd of each year as Kimchi Day in the state. First up, we have testimony from Jeannie Archer, the Maui Korean Community Association. Next, testimony in support from the Hawaii Korean Cultural Center. Testimonies in support from the United Korean Association of Hawaii. Next, support from the Korean American Foundation of Hawaii. And testimony in support from Youngie Overly. And testimony in opposition from Sharon Van Duzen. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in HB 1950? Yes, please. Please provide testimony on the bill without any historical stories. Please.
But I have to talk about kimchi.
Do you support the bill?
I support the bill.
Great, okay.
Can I
Please
give
summarize your testimony.
a little
Thank
bit
you.
of context?
Nope, just whatever, just provide your testimony.
So Angela Melody Young in strong support.
Thank you.
And so kimchi, it's a traditional fermented veggie dish from Korea. And, you know, through time, food evolved along with the advancement of human civilization, and it built a sense of belonging in society. Today, consuming ethnic foods is still a common practice in many countries, including Korea, with its globally recognized dish, kimchi. And so the international standard of kimchi was stipulated by the Codex Alimentarius Commission in 2001, and kimjang, the traditional Korean communal activity of making kimchi, was listed as a United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization's intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2013. And the international recognition that kimchi has today was not obtained easily, since there were international disputes with regards to its standard and originality. And many events have shaped kimchi to what it is today. So
Thank you. Could you
we
summarize,
should
please?
commemorate a day to designate the importance of kimchi.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? If not, thank you very much to all the testifiers. We will now move into decision-making, back up to the top of the agenda. First, the first bill we heard today, which we will do decision-making on first, we took it out of order. That's House Bill 1899 relating to state snails. It's a very compelling testimony, and I would like to move this bill out as is. It has a clean date, and I got permission to do that. So, any questions or concerns on 1899 as is? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1899, the recommendation is as is. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair Takayama is excused. Representative Evslin?
Aye.
Representative Ganadin?
Aye.
Representative Holt, excused. Representative Ichiyama? Aye. Representative Ilagan?
Aye.
Representative Kong? Aye. I vote aye. Representative Souza, excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Now moving to the top of the agenda, House Bill 2148 relating to professional land surveyors. I would like to take the recommendations from the Hawaii Land Surveyors Association, in particular, changing from 20 years to 10-year statute of repose, and as was recommended by the Board of Professional Engineers, Architects, Surveyors, and Landscape Architects, and agreed upon by the Land Surveyors Association, we would add the word civil to line 14, page 2. And we would make whatever necessary technical changes to that. And on page 2, line 14 to 17, we would add the words, if 10 years has elapsed since the latter of the date of completion of the contract, just to make sure that we're consistent. So that is my recommendation, House Bill 2148 HD1 with amendments. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 2148 HD1 with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representative Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on, House Bill 2400 HD1. My recommendation is to move this out with amendments, taking the amendments recommended by the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board to use the word surrender the license rather than revoke, and make additional technical amendments. That's my recommendation. Is there any, are there any questions or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on HB 2400 HD1 with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representative Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Any no or reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to House Bill 1767, House Draft 1. My recommendation is to move this out as is. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1767 HD1 as is, noting the excused absences of Representative Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservations or no vote? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 1812 HD1. This is a very serious matter. I think that it would be appropriate for us to move forward a bill. We need some time to go through the bill and compare and contrast the bill with the rules that we were provided by the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And we need to consult with some other experts in this area before we come back with a recommendation. So I would like to defer this measure until next Thursday, February 22nd. And we'll have this on the agenda for decision-making at that time. Thank you. Next, moving on to House Bill 2227, HD1. My recommendation is to move it out with amendments, taking the amendments that were recommended by the Department of Human Services, and that's my recommendation. Is there any comments or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 2227 HD1 with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representative Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservations or no? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 2253 relating to health. I recommend we move this out with amendments. We're going to make some amendments to the bill to make sure that we address any potential overlap between the existing law and different sections. And we also need to make sure that I would like to, rather than establishing a new chapter or inserting a new section into Chapter 321, we'd like to actually insert the new language into Chapter 329E, which is the language for from the Overdose Prevention and Emergency Response Act. So those are my recommendations. I would include in the committee report that we recognize that the City and County of Honolulu has passed an ordinance to relating to this and which outlines requirements for hotels and restaurants to maintain a supply of these opioid antagonists on site and administer them, and that and I will include that in the committee report. Any questions or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 2253 HD1 with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And before I go on, I want to reiterate that I look forward to hearing any suggestions you have about adequate supply, and getting back to us.
My mistake, Chair. City and County, two doses on hand. City and County requires at restaurants.
Oh, so they've already got it in there. Okay, so then we're even all set. Good thing I didn't mention that. Great. That was fast. Thanks. Okay, moving on. These next two measures we just heard. First one, HB 2526, HD1, relating to motor vehicles. My recommendation is to defer this measure, and the preference being that we will use this next measure instead in order to address this issue, which is to try to get at this concern about repeat offenders of those driving without a license. On the next measure, House Bill 1562, HD1, we need to work on this to figure out the specific amendments to it. I do not think that forfeiture of a vehicle is the right way to approach this after listening to the testimony. What I'd like to do is work on language to replace the language in here to do what I will describe next. That is to provide a choice to the offender that either 2 to 10 days of mandatory jail time, or enter into the judiciary's restricted license program, or if they qualify, enter into the community outreach court, so that we can try to address the issues that are really at the core of this concern. And I want to note that it was confirmed in testimony that, in fact, the law already has strong penalties for this offense, and it's really up to the courts to impose those sentences. And so I really don't want to create harsher sentences unless we provide discretion to the courts. So that's where we are on that one. So we'll defer HB 1562 HD1 to Thursday, February 22nd for decision making. Okay, moving on to the next measure, House Bill 2354 HD1. My recommendation is to move this out as is. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote. Yes, this is for 2354 HD1 as is.
Voting on House Bill 2354 HD1 as is, noting the excused absences of Representatives Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservation or noes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 2772 HD1, my recommendation is to move it out as is. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 2772 HD1 as is, noting the excused absences of Representatives Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservations or noes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 2736, House Draft 1, relating to state gesture. I recommend we move this out with amendments and that we define the shaka. In general, the description will be something like, the shaka generally consists of extending the thumb and smallest finger while holding the 3 middle fingers curled and gesturing in salutation while presenting the front or back of the hand. The wrist may be rotated back and forth for emphasis. In general, that's what I would like to add to this measure as a definition of shaka. Questions or concerns, members?
Like this.
Okay.
Just to clarify, it's a may, not a shall.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I said it generally consists of.
Clarify.
Thank you, appreciate that. Any questions, any further questions or concerns, members? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 2736 HD1 with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservations or no? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 1861 HD1 relating to number plates. My recommendation is to move this out as is. Questions or concerns, members? Representative Ebslin?
Yeah, I think good bill, but I just want to clarify. I think the description is slightly misstated in that it says authorizes the use of all uppercase letters, all lowercase letters, or initial letters in motor vehicle license plates, when I believe it's just authorizing that. It sounds like it's authorizing it for the letters on the plate, when I think it's just a Hawaii and Aloha based on the text of the bill.
Oh, thank you for drawing attention to that, and I will request that with that in mind, thank you for bringing that up. I would like to change my recommendation and make this House Draft 2 and make technical amendments so that we can address any potential unclear language in the bill or description. So on this measure, House Bill 1861 HD1, I recommend with amendments and with technical amendments. Any other questions or concerns? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1861 HD1 with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservations or no? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving to the very last bill, House Bill 1950, related to Kimchi Day. My recommendation is we move this out as is, and I got permission to do this with a clean date. Oh, wow. All right. Any questions or concerns? If not, Representative Miyake for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1950 as is, noting the excused absences of Representatives Takayama, Holt, and Souza. Are there any reservation or no? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. There being no further business before this committee, we are adjourned.